Hey guys, here's the part 4 of this video. Okay, let's look into more details about the async await function. So on the synchronous programming, I'm reusing this image from my Node Basics video where I spoke about the difference between the synchronous style of programming and the asynchronous style of programming. So in synchronous programming, the I/O task 1 has to fully complete before the application could handle the next task. But in asynchronous programming, it's not the case. It fires up task 1, it notes down the task 1 is in progress, and then node moves on to task 2, notes it down and moves on to task 3. When the response comes back, it executes in a future time. So the programming style, the programming syntax changes with this. So let me go through that pretty quickly. So here, let's take there's an IO task 1, and after the task 1, we get a response, and then we want to print the output of task 1, and then we move on to task 2. So in synchronous style, the IO task 1 starts up, and then the process waits for the response for task 1 before it wants to run the next line of code. So the program starts here, it waits, and then once it gets the output, it prints the output, and then it moves on to task 2. In asynchronous way, it fires up task 1, it marks it down that it has started task 1, and then it moves on to this second line of code where it has to print the output of IO task 1. In this case, the output is not complete. I mean, in the sense, the task 1 is not complete, so the output doesn't exist. So what happens is the node, it prints the output is undefined, and then it moves on to task 2. That's not a desirable behavior. So this brings up changes in the programming stack. There are three ways of using this asynchronous mechanism. There's three styles. One is using callback. The second one is using promises. The third one is using async await. So I'm going to talk about all three pretty quick, so we understand what each one does and what's the next and how the next version it improves on the previous version's limitation. Okay, so I have all the three syntaxes here. Let's go through this really quick. So in the callbacks, we're not going to have this async keyword here, and there's no await. So this is the original version of asynchronous programming. So we're going to load up this model, and then on the COVID.save Mongo function, a mongoose function, what we're going to have is we're going to have this callback function inside of the COVID.save. So this function will, it's going to, so the output of COVID.save, if it's either a success or failure, it's going to be passed on to this function, and this function is called after the IO task is done. So on error, it sends this error message something went wrong. So if it did not get an error, meaning if it's a success, it sends the COVID data back. And then I have this here just to explain how this actually works. So in the asynchronous programming, so the COVID.save starts this IO function, and then it moves on to this next line of code. So when you execute this, you'll see the print something first, and then after that you'll see the error message or the rest.send message, because the IO task completes at a future point in a few milliseconds or more, and then it executes this callback. So when the endpoint is called, this task is completed. It calls, it populates this COVID object, and then it starts this IO call, and then it moves on to this next call. After this call, IO task is complete, it runs this function and passes on the data, and then you could do your computation after the IO task is done. This gets complicated when you want to take a data of this output and you want to run another IO call. So what happens is, so let's say using this COVID.country, and you want to get details of every state, then you have to run the IO task inside this block. So it will be another COVID dot find something like COVID dot country, and then you have to write if else block inside this one. So it becomes overly complicated, and it's difficult to read, and it's difficult to maintain, and it's called a callback hell. So the next version of this the coding style is called promises. What promises does is, instead of running a callback function, the code, or like the rest.send or the rest.error, is run inside this then and dot function. So after this IO task has started, the code runs on, moves to the next line and runs this print something. But once the IO task is complete, it runs the dot then on success or dot catch on failure. Again, there's no async keyword or await keyword here, but this is using promises. The good thing about promises is, let's say using this COVID data, you want to run another IO task. What you could do is you could run the task inside of this dot then, and then the output of that could be captured using another dot then. So the good thing is, this goes deep inside the nested call, but because of the nested chaining, this code remains flat, easy to maintain, and easy to understand. But still, again, this looks way different than the synchronous programming. So the latest version of this one is async await. It's just a syntactic sugar. It still uses the then catch promises under the hood, but how it looks in the front end is, you use the async keyword in the function that you're going to run the async code, and you use the await keyword in front of the IO task. What it does is it eliminates running this callback, and it eliminates running the dot catch function, that dot then or catch function, and you could continue with the rest.send code directly beneath that. Meaning, it looks like synchronous code, but the await function does not run the output, which is the COVID, until the IO task is complete. So behind the scenes, it's the same promises, but the code looks like synchronous programming. So this makes it easier to work with, and easy to understand and follow. And the one I used in our code is async await, just to keep it easy, because it's a one-on-one video, and I have to use async await doesn't have like a catch function, right? So you have to use the JavaScripts try and catch and catch the error and send this message, just in case if there's a connection or some other issue with the database. And chaining with async await is not too difficult. If you want to run another IO task based on this output, then you could simply add await COVID dot find, and then using country, or something like that. This is just an example, but again, you could run multiple await commands, and the flow looks just like the synchronous programming here. I'm going to remove this. We won't need this. Save this. Okay, let's move on to the other endpoints. One to receive all data. So this will be the endpoint to view all data. There I'm going to create this router dot get and then here let me do async function request response. Okay, I'm going to write a try catch, same as before. I'm going to call it a const query await find. So this mongoose call just grabs all the data from the COVID's collection. So, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna send the and then catch error. We're gonna send rest.status of 500 send. We're gonna call something. Okay, let's test this out. Let me save this. Let's go back to Postman. Okay, so Postman, I'm gonna call this. I'll copy this URL. I'm gonna put this here, and then get call COVID headers. I'm gonna call it application, and then let me send. Now I get data of all the countries. So that's listing all data. Let's move on to listing just one country. Right, so endpoint to view one specific country. So let's do router.get. What I'm going to do is, to get one data, I need the ID for that country. Right, so I'm going to issue this ID param here, which grabs the ID from the URL and passes on to the code we need. So it's an async function, request, response. Inside the function, I'm going to assign this ID to this variable, request.params.id. So what this one does is it takes the ID from the URL and assigns it to this variable. Now let's do the try catch. Const, I'm going to call this doc await find one, and I'm going to find one country based on an ID. And the ID is the ID that we just populated on the previous step, and we're going to send the response we just captured from the IO task, and then in the catch we send the error message start status 100 dot send, and then send went wrong. Right, okay, save this and we go back to Postman, and then I'm going to copy one single ID here, and then I'm going to go create a new let me copy this first, and on top of this I'm going to copy this ID, paste it here in the header. Okay, and I'm gonna send this, and now we get the country for the ID that we pasted on the URL. Let me also go back. Let's make sure the country B works. And yes, it pulls the country B data. Okay, so these are the get endpoints to list all countries or just one single country. What we're going to do next is we're going to work on updating a single country, right? So endpoint to update a country. Okay, the update code, I'm gonna do router dot put. Put is the HTTP call for updating to same /ID, because we need to update one single country and we need an ID for that. Async request response callback. The function where I'm gonna just store the ID first. It's gonna be rec.params.id. Move on to try. I'm gonna try to update a country. I have to populate the data of the country first into my code here. Meaning a user can simply update record cases or simply change the total cases. So we need to populate everything, change just the one that user needs to change, and leave the rest as is. And one condition we need to assure is user does not change the country name. So we're gonna let user change the cases, total and recovered, but we're not gonna let the user change the country name. Okay, so the first step is let's pull the let's pull the country information first. So I'm gonna do find one, and then using the ID underscore ID. Okay, so now it populates the country information for one country. Right, so what I'm going to check here is rec.body.country. So if a user sends in country information, we don't want to update the country information. Maybe there could be a typo, so user cannot send the country information. User can send only the cases information. So if user sends any country information, we're gonna tell them not allowed. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna declare this variable updated total cases. I'm just gonna initialize with 0. So what I'm gonna do here is, if we receive a new total cases, body.total cases, I'm gonna update this updated total cases that I declared before to the rec.body.total cases. So if I get this updated information from the user, I'm going to update this. I'm going to assign this value to this variable. So okay, so if we do not get that information from user, what we're going to do is we're going to use we're going to take this, and then we're going to fill that with doc.total cases. So what we're doing is, if you don't receive any information about total cases as an update from the user, we're just going to use the information that we received from the database. That's nothing but the existing information, right? So that's good. We're going to do the same thing for the recovered cases. And updated recovered cases equals 0. Rec.body.total recovered cases. If there is anything that the user sent, updated recovered cases, we're going to update that with work.body.recovered cases. Else what we're going to do is update recovered cases equals doc.recovered cases. That's the actual information. So that's good. What do we have here? Okay, so what we're gonna do is the else. We're gonna create this new variable and populate with the information we just received. Updated total cases, and then recovered cases is updated recovered cases. So we're going to create this object. And we're going to perform this database task where what we're going to do is we're going to use doc, the one we just pulled, dot update 1, and then so what we're going to do is we're going to use this await function on the doc that we requested, and we're going to send the updated information from this object. So we don't change the country remains the same. We just change the total and the recovered cases if you receive from the user, right? So that's good. Let's do a catch block. Where we say rest.status of 500.send something. Okay, let's check this out. Go back to Postman. What we could do is let's take this country B, and then let us update the cases here, right? So I'll go to put. What I'm going to do is take the headers, content type is application JSON, and go to body. I'm going to do body is JSON. Total cases, we can update that to 60,000 and recovered cases to 6,000. Okay, so in the previous call you would have seen 40 and 4,000, so I'm going to change that to 60 and 6,000. Okay, let's send this. Make sure this ID exists. Oh, you know what? I may have made a mistake in the code here. I'm gonna go here, and I forgot to send a response. So rest.send rest.send and the updated to receive response from the Mongoose call. So I'm going to save this, go back, and then try now. Okay, now it's updated. Okay, is 1. We go back, hopefully change. Let us also look into the all countries here. Make sure that the country B is 60. Okay, so it has been updated to 60. So the update functionality is successful. Let's move on to the delete piece. Okay guys, this is the end of part 4 of this video. See you guys on part 5.